Hi, I'm Sue O'Berry and welcome to the In the Hoop Club. In this month's lesson, you're going to create your very own shabby chic, three-dimensional chenille pumpkin and create this little bow all inside the hoop. So grab your machine and let's get stitching. Let's go ahead and review the materials that you're going to need for this project. The first is you're going to need 2 of these 9x12 pieces of felt for your front. The next is for your back, and that's actually going to be the part that's right here. And you're going to need 2 pieces for that, one for one part of the pumpkin and one for the other part. That's why we have double the numbers here. And these are 6x8 pieces of felt. The next is the top of the pumpkin, which is, we used a really pretty lame, and that's what gave it like a shine. So we have 2 6x8 pieces of cotton lame. The next is going to be what's kind of inside the little pumpkin to give it some texture, and we used a really cool kind of Halloween print. This is going to be, again, it says the bottom of the pumpkin, and that's 6x8 as well. Now you're going to notice that you have 4 of these little dots, but you can really mix them up and use whatever you want, but we're going to be using this for the middle of the pumpkin, and again it's 6x8. And now you have another set of little dots, and these are for the base of the pumpkin. So like as we cut through, you'll see a teeny tiny bit of this in there. So we're going to put that aside. Those are also 6x8. The next is you're going to need craft fuse. We need 2 6x8 pieces of this. It's fusible on one side and not on the other. Has like a stiffness to it, and it's kind of help our little pumpkin stand up straight. So we're going to need 2 of those for 6x8. And then the last thing is the top stabilizer. It's just a clear wash away stabilizer. We have it cut at 8x12. At one point in the project, you need to just fold this in half widthwise and cut it so that you would have an 8-inch tall by 6-inch wide, and you'd have 2 of those. But we'll do that later on in the project. All right, and now for this adorable little bow, which you are going to create all inside the hoop. You're going to need 2 pieces of material. One is going to be the back of the bow, which technically it doesn't really matter because you'll see the back also in the front. So really just entirely use whatever materials in the future that you want, but we thought these would look really good. So we have a kind of like a lime green cotton 6x8, and for the front of the bow, we're using this really fun, trendy chevron. So that's there. And the very last thing is you are going to be using this dotted tearaway stabilizer to create your bow, and that needs to just be 9 inches wide by 12 inches tall. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next step, and I will see you there. First thing you're going to do is just put some best press on all of your cotton fabrics. Kind of let it set for a moment, and then you're going to just press them. So press all your materials with best press. This is kind of a trick I do a lot when I have a lot of pieces to press that I know aren't going to necessarily be required to look perfectly flat. I'll stack them like this, and then just one at a time peel them away so that you can do a little extra pressing as needed. And it's creating some static. So go ahead and press all your cotton materials, keeping them together as a little set, like these for the base and so forth for the bow. Okay, next you're going to need to get out your goddess sheet, and we are going to need 2 of the 6x8 pieces of felt, those 2 pieces there, and the craft fuse. Now remember, one of these sides is fusible and one is not, so let's just do one at a time. We're going to place the felt down first, and then the fusible side on top of the felt, just like so. Take advantage of that beautiful goddess sheet where you can fold it in half and give it a good press and some steam. Remember, if you're steaming with your goddess sheet, always steam from the fold out. So let's start here. This way the steam can escape. Okay, let's cool that baby down. All right, looks good. So now the back of our pumpkin has some stability. So go ahead and repeat that on the second one. Okay, perfect. So now we have 2 of these, and let's go ahead and set up our machine. Machine setup is super easy. You're going to just wind a matching bobbin with whatever thread you're going to use on the top, and we used black, and go ahead and insert those into your machine. The next is you're going to just want to make sure you have a brand new embroidery needle. We're just using a basic embroidery 7511. And then the other thing is your project has 2 different pieces. There is the pumpkin has where the slits are in the bottom, and then there's another one where the slits are at the top. So the first one we're going to do is where the slits are at the bottom. So choose the design ITHC _ 04 A15 October 01. So you're going to choose the first design, insert that into your machine, and then we're going to go ahead and hoop the first large piece of felt. That's your front felt. Next, I want you to place the bottom pumpkin piece, which is the little dots, just one piece of that. And then let's go ahead and secure this with some tape. We're going to use lots of tape in this project. All right, so let's smooth this out. Great. I want you to go ahead and insert this into your machine, and we're going to sew stitch number 1, which is the first pumpkin secure stitch. Okay, so I'll see you right back here in a moment. Okay, let's layer this guy up so that we can start stitching some more. The next layer that's going to go on top of the dots is going to be the print, and these are all going to be right side facing up. The next will be the center portion, which will be another little dot, and then on top of all of this is going to be that pretty glittery lame. So we have lame, dots, print, and then the original dot. So let's go ahead and stack those on top of one another and use some more tape. Maybe a little smaller piece this time. All right, here we go. So go ahead and insert this into your machine, and we're going to be stitching a ton of lines now, actually creating the chenille. Okay, let's talk about rotary cutters that are designed for chenille. This one is actually called the Clover / Cutter, and it comes with 2 different attachments. Now this one is so that you can get into that long groove like what we're about to do here, and go straight. So this is your straight cutter, and this little one here that has a shorter groove is for curves. So that's just wanted to let you know that's what the 2 differences are of those. And then what we're going to do is use those 5-inch craft scissors and kind of get this thing started, because if we just put this right in here, because we're doing this all in the hoop, there's not necessarily enough room for it to kind of get going. So what you're going to do is you do not want to cut through you want to cut the top 3 layers. You do not want to cut through the bottom layer or the main felt. So we're only cutting the lame, the middle dot, and also the print. So grab these scissors here and just kind of get it started. Now I found that the little ones at the end were just as easy to cut manually, but the rest of them, okay, let's clip this. I just get it started like right here. Just kind of slip my scissors in and take about a 1/2 inch bite. And that's just to get this guy going. And you see how I'm cutting straight all the way as if there was an imaginary line there? So like this one here, I'm going to cut all the way straight, and this will help when we use our rotary cutter, the / cutter tool. I am going to remove the tape just to get it out of the way. Now here's a little one, so this one I might just go ahead and cut all the way through. And I'm going to rotate this, because this little one right here, again, make sure you're only cutting the top 3 layers. We're just going to clip through this one all the way. Okay, so now we're going to put this back around. This is so awesome. Get the little groove underneath, hold it down, and let's remove that tape too, and just cut all the way through. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, let's do the next one. And you see how it does help that we've kept the lines kind of following that imaginary line. And just complete the whole front just like this. Okay, how cool is that? You just cut chenille all inside your hoop. The next thing we're going to do is take that clear wash away stabilizer that you had a large piece and just fold it in half so that you have two 6x8 pieces. And put the second one aside for the next pumpkin. And we're just going to lay this right on top. This will just prevent our embroidery machine presser foot getting hooked onto any of these little chenille pieces. And we're just going to tape that in place. I found that you can always remove tape, but it's so it's just easier to put a few extra pieces. We are going to go ahead and put it all the way around here on the sides and the top. All right. Okay, now we're going to turn our hoop to the wrong side, and there's all that ickiness which we don't want to have exposed, and that's why we created that original piece with the felt and the craft fuse, and it gives it a nice little stiffness later. So cover this over, making sure that you're covering any of the exposed stitching. And you know what? I think I'm going to use nice long pieces on the back. And then what I can do is actually smush it down and wrap it around. I like that. Smush it down and wrap it around. Even with a scratchy voice, I still have to make a few jokes. All right. Okay, so now turn that back up. What you're going to do is insert this into the machine, and you're going to be stitching the base pumpkin all the way around. Okay, fantastic. And now we have that slit stitch right here, and we made it match with the thread so it was less noticeable. And then this is what the back looks like. So go ahead and remove all your materials from the hoop, and don't put that hoop too far away because you got to create this is basically the bottom slit, and you're going to create the top slit in just a moment. So remove all of your tape from your project. Okay, and next let's go ahead and cut all the way around this. I found it was easier if I kept the stabilizer on that, and we're going to use our big Ginger shears for this. So make sure everything's flat in the back, and you're going to cut, I don't know, about like 1/4 of an inch away from the actual stitching. Okay, now you can discard all of this, except I do want you to keep one long, but like a 1/2 inch long piece, or wide, and the length of this felt, which is 12 inches, because we're going to use this later on. So go ahead and cut that, and it doesn't have to be perfect, it's just something that we're going to use later on. So put that to the side. This you can discard. Now it's time to do some fun and reveal. Let's go ahead and remove the wash away stabilizer. How fun is that? Before we fluff it up, let's get our 5-inch craft shears again. And there's reasons that I like both of these. The reason I like these is because unlike your shears, your regular shears, these are long. And sometimes it's hard to control like tiny areas, and the 5-inch craft shears are equally as sharp, but they're shorter, so you have more control. We're just going to cut right up that slit. Try not to cut the stitching, but you do want to go all the way into that point. So make sure you cut that real good. And here's the fun part. We are going to fluff this baby up. We're going to give it its chenille look. You can always do more later. You can open each of them up. I mean, there's so much fun stuff you can do with this. Okay, but that is the initial fluffing that we're gonna do. So now what you're gonna do is everything that we just did to create the bottom slit, which is this one here, you're now going to do to create the top slit, which you can see it right there. So everything that we just did, do for the second pumpkin. Make sure you choose the top slit pumpkin design, or else you'll have two matching ones. So choose the top slit design and repeat all the same process. And once we're done, we'll have 2 pumpkins here. So I'll see you right back here once you have your second pumpkin done. Okay, so we have our first pumpkin that had the slit on the bottom, and then you have your second pumpkin that has the slit on the top. And all you do in order to make these two become three-dimensional is slip them inside one another. What I think is kind of interesting is as you do it, you can rough up the chenille and it'll add even more dimension. Okay, so that's what we've got so far. If you see how it might be leaning a little bit, you might want to adjust how much is cut out. Actually, it looks pretty good though. I know when I was cutting around the whole thing, I cut 1/4 inch approximately. At the bottom, you might want to make sure that those two little areas at the bottom slit and the bottom of the other pumpkin piece are about the same seam allowance. So that's just one thing I noticed. All right. Hoop bow. So in order to create the bow, first thing you're going to do is hoop that other piece of tearaway, the dotted tearaway stabilizer, and you're going to place what would be the main front of your bow. You just get some tape, and then that would be facing right side up, and then you're going to use the back bow. We're going to create this kind of like a pillow. So right sides together, and just put some tape on there. When you're done with this, we're going to insert it into the machine, and we're going to choose the bow design, which is the third one, and we're going to create 3 separate pieces. So insert it into the machine, and I'll see you back here. Okay, you've got your bow top and then your 2 tails all finished. You'll have noticed that as you were stitching that you had to press start in between each one. This is the first, second, and third. The reason why I did that was perhaps in the future you'd want to maybe fold a piece just for here and sew one bow, like the bow top, and then have just the center, or whatever you're wanting to do. So that was why I gave you options. Let's go ahead and remove this material from the hoop and get rid of the tape. And then all you're going to do is cut. Let's get rid of the stabilizer too. We don't need it right now. I like this dotted stabilizer for something that only has like a single running stitch where you don't really need a whole lot of stability, but you still need some. It's really good for that. And it cuts away, or excuse me, it tears away really easy. It kind of reminds me of like paper towels a little bit, or baby wipes, but stiff. So this is like a dotted, perforated stabilizer. Okay, that should be good enough. And we're going to go ahead and just cut, leaving about 1/8 inch all the way around each piece, except for at the opening. The opening we want to leave at least, I don't know, whatever you have there is usually a good idea, but maybe about 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. And before we turn these right side out, let's just give them a good press. The old trick that we learned as we were doing basic sewing is sew a seam, press a seam. All right, now let's go ahead and turn them right side out. Make sure you shove the extra seam allowance back inside and give it a good press. Perfect. So now you have 3 pieces, and then you got your one like the right and the left, and then you have your top of your bow. Okay, let's go ahead and put our bow together. You're going to notice that your tails are really long, and the reason I create them long is so that way you could use them for another project. But truthfully, if we leave them this long for the pumpkin, they're going to just drag on the table. So adjust the height of how big you want long you want your tails, laying it right onto the pumpkin itself. So what I did was I just kind of laid the tip of the tail and went all the way to where the stem of the pumpkin was, and that's where I actually cut both of these. So it's about, let's see, it's about 1, 2, 3 inches. So for now I'm going to go ahead and cut that off, and that leaves a little bit of seam allowance for kind of the inside here as well as we stuff it up in there. So what you're going to do is thread a needle with 4 threads. I call it a 4-thread needle. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Put a knot at the end, and all we're going to do is just gather at about 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top raw edges of our tails. So there's one little gather, and I'm going to pull that all the way to the end. And now we're going to gather at, again, 1/4 inch. Okay, so now you have something that looks like that. Next, you're going to be shoving and inserting these two raw edges of the tail up into the little top opening. So I'm going to flip this around so it's facing me. And we're going to just hand sew the tails to the bow. Just kind of a little stitch. No one's going to see this stitching because it's going to get covered up, but you still want it to look kind of hidden as possible. Okay, once you get to the other end, on the wrong side of your bow, we're just going to tie it off. And remember, I tie 1 knot just there, and just to prepare myself for the next hand sewing journey, I go ahead and do a little double knot, and I leave it about 1/4 inch away from the last knot, and then I cut my threads. That way my needle, my hand sewing needle, is ready to go. And then let's just insert it into our clover disc, clover dome. Okay, so remember that that long piece of felt that I asked you to cut earlier. That was from the remaining of the front part of the pumpkin. And what we're going to do is we're just going to create like the center of the bow. We're going to kind of squish it up, squish up the little bow, bring it to the other side, and tie it so that the center of the long piece is in the center of the bow. So there you go. That's what we have for right now. Now, just to kind of finish the whole thing off, get the pumpkin standing exactly how you want it, and now we're going to just tie our bow around the stem of the pumpkin. You can tie it tight or loose. I kind of made mine a little bit tight because then I could reposition it. So tie it once and tie it in a knot, and then cut away the extra. Cut it on an angle if you want, or whatever, it's your choice. But there you go. Now we're going to make it stand up, and there is your pretty little shabby chic 3D chenille pumpkin with an in the hoop bow. Thank you so much for joining me here today and creating your very own fall pumpkin. You learned so many new techniques, and I can't wait to see all the other little pumpkins you make and display in your fall display at home. So make sure you take pictures and send them on in. And one last thing, don't forget to think inside the hoop. Bye!